name's Tom Singer, and this is Concert Cues. Today, my guest, Amit Peled.
Peled.
Peled. Put the wrong emphasis on the syllable. Okay, Peled. So, you're going to play the cello for us on Saturday night and
Yeah.
a couple of other times.
Yeah, that's what I do. Cello is my voice. That's my job, and I actually one of the few people in the world that made my hobby my job, and that's how I make my living. I do something I love.
So, looking at your bio, I saw something about a book being written about you, making this interesting transition from basketball to cello. Was the cello there before the basketball?
No, basketball was there before and is still
Oh,
around.
okay.
So after tonight's rehearsal, I already found out in the hotel where's the best sport bar in town, so I can go and watch the NBA game. So I don't play it, but I love it. No, I started when I was 10 years old, which is quite late to play the cello.
Right.
But it's a good age to be good and cool in basketball. So I was really into that, and cello was secondary until about 15, 16. Then cello took over.
And why do you think that is? What happened to make it
Well,
special?
you know, looking back, I think I decided to stay with the cello because I thought I wouldn't be tall enough. But now I'm 6'5". But back then I wasn't. But I had to choose. My coach, basketball coach, and my cello teacher took me aside and said, look, you're too good in both, and you have to make a decision. You can't do every day both, because I had to start practicing 4 hours a day, the cello, and I had training every day and games, and I had to make a decision. And I'm very thankful that my parents allowed me to do that by myself. I remember myself sitting in my room and trying to do the pros and cons, and I would never become a basketball player, and I am a cellist, so it was a good decision.
Yeah, well, you've got quite a little career that you've built as a cellist. You got to play Pablo Casal's cello for a number of years, and you're still playing a pretty special instrument, it sounds like.
Yeah, so I played the Casal's cello for 6 years, from 2012 to 2018. And since the pandemic, I've been playing on a 1695 Grancino, Italian instrument, which everybody will get to hear this weekend. So I was traveling 2 buildings with it, so I had to buy a plane ticket for it. And it sits next to me on the plane. I put it heads down so I can lean on it and put my legs under, and I even get a meal for it. And I get the miles for the cello, so it's a good deal.
I see. Well, and you just mentioned to me before we started recording that you also spent a week in Bozeman doing master classes. So tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I have to say that even before that masterclass, Montana as a whole is a special state for me, because in 2001, when I started my professional career, I gave my debut in America in Bozeman, Montana.
Really?
Yeah, I had still have a very good friend who was the head of the string music department at the university in Bozeman, and he brought me all the way from Europe, where I was living, in Germany, in Berlin, to give master classes, to play a recital, and then it spread out to Missoula, and then Whitefish, and multiple times. But this is my debut in Billings. So I love Montana. I hate the flights landing in Montana because it's always shaky because of the wind. No matter which city, it's always scary. However, I love this state. I love the people, the nature. And yeah, last week I spent a whole week in a very special place called the Station Foundation. It's a place where veterans can heal from mental problems that they have acquired on missions. So after they are released from the service, this place offers them and their families, their kids, their wives, sometimes those really heroes come back to regular life, and they cannot deal with a relationship, with taking the kids to school, speaking to the children, even though they've been in stressful situations overseas. So I know the head of the foundation, who is a veteran pilot of a helicopter, and we thought that classical music can actually heal those people, and at the same time, the similarities between soldiers who went into battles, special forces, the adrenaline, the high level of efficiency, it's so similar to what we do. on stage. Just we don't do it, and you know,
And
we're
get
not,
shot
we're
at.
not in danger.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of similarities. The amount of time you invest in your craft, and the high level, and the ability to be so good in one thing, and then sometimes not to wake up from that proficiency and live your life, the daily things. So that week was both ways, was healing and helping the veterans, but also learning about ourselves. And it was an amazing week, and we will do it next year again. And the students and myself and the staff, we were just, you know, transformed in it. So it was very special.
So that's a different kind of master class than I've ever heard talked
Yeah.
about before.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
And this is, it goes along with what I believe classical music is. It's a way of communication between people. And I don't think we just have to sit on stage, bow, put the black and white suit, say goodbye, and go to the next stop. We have to interact with the community we play. And that's very important for me. And this is just another way to do it.
So you've given me a transition into the pieces we're going to play, the chanson. What does that communicate? What do you think that's saying?
Well, that particular concerto by Saint-Saëns is very unique because it's the first real romantic cello concerto. It's like a composer who came and said, you know what? I think that this instrument can be a solo instrument, because before that nobody believed in it. It was a bassline instrument. So
I sing bass, and nobody
Yeah.
writes good solos for
Yeah.
basses either.
So
Romantic ones.
There was a concerto before written by Schumann in 1853, but everybody thought this is too crazy and too difficult. So he never heard it in his lifetime, and nobody played it. But then in 1872, Saint-Saëns lived in Paris and wanted to make a name for himself. And he thought, how can I make a mark? Should I do the same and write a piano concerto, or sing an aria, or should I take something that nobody did before and attract attention? And that's what he did. And not only that he decided that the cello would be in the front line, he said, you know what, screw the tutti. Tutti is the first big introduction. We don't need an introduction. I'm going to put the cello right away in. So what you will hear when you hear the concerto, you'll hear a big bang from the orchestra, and after that first note, you will get scared, but then the cello dives in. So that's very special, because there's no concerto in the world, not just for cello, and any instrument that starts with boom, play. And that effect draws the attention he wanted. And I hope it will draw the attention of the audience. So it puts the cello in the front line right away, and it has all the emotions that one can think of coming out of the cello in a span of 18 minutes. That's the length of the concerto. It's kind of a short concerto.
And it's apparently only one movement.
Yeah, well, it's 3 sections that are all connected into one movement. Yeah, so, and it really shows what the cello is all about. Cello is the closest instrument to the human voice. It has the bass, the middle range, the tenor, and the soprano. So it can really represent each person of a family. A grandfather, a grandmother, mother, father, kids. And you can really have a whole conversation between low and high and in between with one instrument. And that's what makes it, I think, the best instrument.
So going back then, when you chose the cello, did you realize all of that? Or was it something else that drew you to it?
Well, I realized the girl part in the family. I was in love with a girl who played cello. That's it.
Okay, I like that.
I had a crush on a girl who played cello, and she was 14 and I was 10. And the music room, luckily, where I grew up in a kibbutz. It's a even smaller communities in Billings, in the middle of nowhere.
Quite a bit smaller, I would think. Yeah.
And the music room was just under our classroom. So I would hear her practice this instrument every day. And I, of course, didn't dare talking to her, so I figured out if I'll play whatever she plays, I'll marry her. And that didn't happen. But I play the cello now.
Do you know if she still does?
She does just as an amateur. She lives in London, and we are in touch. She stopped the cello when she was 16. Apparently she wasn't good at it, but her mission, she says now, was to make sure that I will become a cellist. But a few years ago I was in London and I played a recital, and she came with her family, with her kids, and I dedicated the encore for her. And it was really special because my family, they're not musicians, and there was no other reason for me to start a cello. So it was destiny.
So I've heard some rumors that there might be an encore in this performance. Is that a possibility?
Yeah, so there will be, so, but still, I hope people will clap. But the piece that we're going to add to the program, since the Saint Saëns, as I said, it's so compressed everything into 18 minutes, we thought there will be time. And then we have the Schubert unfinished symphony. We wanted to sort of conclude.
Finish something.
Yeah, finish something. And we will play the Kol Nidre, which is a very dear piece for me because it's a Jewish piece by Bruch, who wasn't a Jewish composer, but this is based on the most holy prayer that the Jewish people pray in Yom Kippur, in the holiest of all holidays for the Jewish people. And it's Bruch went to a synagogue on that Yom Kippur Eve, and he heard the melody of the prayer, and he was so struck by it that he went home and wrote it down, and that's a piece. And it represents the prayer that each one of us supposed to recite at the end of the year, asking for forgiveness from God. So it's a very special, beautiful piece, and the whole relationship of the piece is between the cantor, the singer, which is the cello, and the congregation, which is the orchestra. And you can really feel that you are in a synagogue or a church or whatever you go to or believe in, but that relationship between the person that gives the talk or is reciting the prayer and the congregation that replies, and as it goes along, as in every service, they both become engaged with each other and more intense, and then comes a resolution at the end, which I'm not going to say, you know, if I make it to hell or heaven, after begging for forgiveness, but there is that resolution at the end of the piece.
Well, and what you're saying about that conversation between the soloist, the cantor, whatever, and the orchestra, or between a chorus and an orchestra, that's kind of the nature of almost all concertos, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I think it's the nature of all music, because music for me is simply a language, and language is there for us to communicate. So yes, we communicate the text to the public so they can understand what the composer wanted to say, but when we communicate it, we talk to each other, and it could have been words in English or in Hebrew or in German, but it happened to be notes in music.
Yeah.
But it's the same exact reason why we do it. So when somebody closes his eyes and just plays and doesn't listen, I don't think they serve the meaning of music.
So do you find yourself interacting, looking at the orchestra? I mean, the reason I ask, years ago I got to see Yo-Yo Ma perform, and I was surprised about the amount of time he spent looking back at the orchestra while they were playing, and then waiting for the part where he was coming, and just making it flow from whatever the orchestra was doing, and then tossing it back to them.
Absolutely. I mean, I always work with my students. I always tell them, because we play by memory, especially a concerto, you don't play with the music. So I always tell them you have 3 options. One is to look up to acknowledge the public with your eyes open. The other one is to look up to the public, to acknowledge them with your eyes closed. And the third one is to acknowledge your partners. That's it. But you cannot put your head down and just see you at the end. That's not communicating the right way. And it's the same with speech. Like, I think music and theater, or being a politician or a lawyer talking to jury, it's the same thing. I mean, if you don't have eye contact, if you don't pause and let them understand, if you don't find their pulse and try to manage that with the pulse of the music or your speech, they will not believe you. However, if you do all those things, they will be with you. They might not agree with you, but they will be with you. And that's what we want when we communicate music. So those 3 options are, I think, crucial when you're on stage, not just for music, for any kind of communication. If you're a politician, an actor, or a musician trying to communicate with public.
So is your focus solely on classical music? Do you branch out at all?
No. Yes, classical music.
Okay.
Once, even from the cello repertoire, when I was a student, I really wanted to play something by Mozart. And Mozart did not write for cello because there was not beautiful woman cellist that he could write for. So he did not write anything for us. So I took a violin sonata and I transposed it for the cello, and I came to the lesson and I played it. So my teacher almost killed me. He said, "We have 400 years of repertoire that you have to master, and you go and you branch out. Wait, just master it." And I haven't done that yet.
You
so.
haven't finished that yet. Okay.
I mean, I love listening to other music, and I also conduct orchestras, and I also, so I love expanding my repertoire, but within the realm of classical music, there's so much, and I just love it. So if I drive in the car, I'll listen to jazz or other things, but I still feel that I'm a baby as far as knowing my music.
Well, a very active baby, though. I mean, you mentioned the conducting. You've got your own orchestra that you basically conduct. You're part of you've established a virtuosic,
Mount
chamber
Vernon Virtuosi,
chamber group.
orchestra,
And you're incredibly busy as a soloist. It's and you played the last time. I think I saw that you played this concerto, this Saint-Saëns, with someone fairly recently.
Yeah, well, 2021 is the 100th anniversary of his death. So it's a kind of celebratory year for Saint-Saëns to begin with. So yeah, I've played it, but
and who was it you played it with? I've forgotten.
I played it so many times now, so
Give me two examples.
One was in the Kennedy Center
recently
with the Washington Chamber Orchestra. The other one was in Cleveland.
Okay.
So, you know.
Those, it makes people in Billings feel pretty special when their soloist has come from places like that and performed with those orchestras.
I'll tell you, a stage is a stage, an orchestra is an orchestra, music is music. It doesn't matter where you are.
I agree, but it's still it's an honor to have you here.
And an airport is an airport, so you just
Some of them are windier than others.
That's true. No, but I love to play what maybe you call smaller places, but part of the mission I had when I had the Casals cello was as Mrs. Casals, the widow of Casals, who is still alive. She told me, "Amit, go and find your voice, your own voice with it." And I realized through the years of playing it that it's not necessarily my cello voice, it's my call. And I realized that when I investigated what he did as a humanitarian, as a cellist, as a musician, was not only to play in Carnegie Hall, was to play in any middle of nowhere place, not just in America, in the world. So a typical tour of Pablo Casals would be to start in New York and to end up in San Francisco 6 months later, and stopping literally in every town in America. And I found many programs he did in Duluth, Minnesota, in Tucson, Arizona, and you name it. And we found the program, and I repeated it 100 years later on the same cello. And not only that this was an amazing experience to do it in the same concert series, but also to realize what he played, which is very different than today's concerts. It was sort of more like a meal where you have a short piece, aperitif, then a big half-an-hour piece, and then all desserts, show pieces, short pieces. So you really feel good as audience. But even more so, some of the reviews that we found from those concerts mentioned how he would spend, for instance, in Duluth, he stayed for an hour and a half at the place, talked to each member of the audience. And people don't understand that Pablo Casals back then was like Joe Bon Jovi today, or Michael Jackson, or all those people. I mean, he was the Beatles of the time. He was such a superstar. So for him to stay and to do it, you realize what music was. Music was not, you play a concert, you get a high fee, and you go on to the next one. No, you play everywhere, and you spend time in that place, and you engage with the audience. And so I learned from it that I have to be humble and to do the same, because music is music. That's what you do. So that's my voice.
I love that attitude. Wow, that's very cool. And I don't think we can top that, so I'm going to stop there. Thank you again. We're looking very much forward to seeing you here perform in our wonderful little hall.
Thank you. Great to be here.